Ashish, I want to a little bit focus on your own kind of learnings, your own journey. You really kind of cut your teeth in the private equity world with Chris Capital. That's where you really learned. That's where you got made your name, you made the money. All of that happened there. And then you made this shift over the last 10 to 12 years, almost equal amount of time, I would say, you spent in the private equity world, in the corporate world, and in the impact space now. What are some of the learnings that you had there, or some of the skills or some of the learning which could apply as is to this space? And what are some of the things you almost had to unlearn, or new skills or the new kind of ways of working that you pick up here? I think that contrast would be interesting to understand.
Yeah. So firstly, I'm quite hopeful that I think people with corporate skills can come into the social sector, the development sector, the impact sector, let's put it this way. Because at the end of the day, a lot of it is about, self-leadership, leading others, and then leading for impact, right? And those tools that you develop, whether it's in terms of recruiting people, managing them, performance management, or whether it's in terms of implementation, execution, toolkit, I think you have to do that here as well. So I'm very hopeful. You just need to understand the domain and take the time. And I think, frankly, corporate people should be excited because the problems here are more complex, more interesting, more impactful than in the corporate world. I think what one has to unlearn is, I think in the corporate world, there is a belief sometimes you can get things done very quickly. And you very rapidly come to, oh yeah, I figured it out. I read this, and in education, ye karna hai. And a lot of it comes from personal experience also. I think that's a big danger here. Because, here I think one needs to look at the evidence a little bit more carefully. It's not, these things have been tried before. One needs to be a little bit more dispassionate, I would say. And understand that it takes time, to figure out even what to prioritize and what the design may be to solve the problem. I think as corporate people want to jump and find the answer very quickly. वैसे होता नहीं है. Two is patience. I think, we are used to in corporate world of quarterly results and quarterly metrics. Of course, you need some metrics here also, but I think you need to have patience because it takes much longer. These are more complex problems. And so I think getting rid of a little bit of that, you need the energy, but you need long-termism versus short-termism in this space. I think it's very important. Third is, I think, having the humility to work through many actors and with many actors. I think, and all of them in the driver's seat. You're building your own company, right? You do your own thing. When you're trying to support government or you're trying to support an ecosystem of partners who you're working with, or you're trying to support an industry body that works with markets, that it's not easy to play that backseat role where you get less recognition. It's sometimes not easy when you're trying to get multiple players to work with together. So I think in the corporate world, you feel all the levers, or it's frustrating sometimes when things are going well for things outside your control, they fall back. Mostly in the corporate world, of course, policy can change even in the corporate world, but mostly the levers are in your control.
Externalities are less.
The externalities are fewer. So I think just one needs a mindset that's more humility, more compassion, more understanding of the rhythm of the space, a little bit less focused on me, and more working with others, more collaborative, and long-term oriented. Patience.
At least one thing that I've kind of felt that the challenges here are much more complex than the challenges in the corporate world. I've not spent that long a time in the corporate world. That's my kind of listening. Do you kind of concur with that?
I would agree.
You kind of illustrate that with something. Why do you feel so, and why do you think it's the case?
So, I mean, let's take a typical corporate, even if it's TCS, right? A company today with 600,000 people, not easy to manage. But ultimately, it's got a hierarchy. Decision-making is very clear. And, if the bosses decide tomorrow we want to put lots of money behind a new geography or new service line or new way of working even. It can now, for that, even to implement that, you have to convince the next level and the level below. You'll do workshops, you'll create together, you'll then create plans, and then you get people embedded in KPIs, and it'll take you a couple of years to deliver to go make it happen in a large company like that. And particularly if you want to move that mothership in a slightly different direction, it may take longer now. I think imagine education. One state in India, in school education, a reasonable size state, would have as many employees as TCS, right? 600 plus thousand employees. Now imagine in that system to bring about change where it isn't the typical hierarchy. Each teacher works in a classroom by herself mostly. Most primary schools in India don't even have a headmaster, right? There are 2 or 3 teachers across 5 grades. In some states that are more densely populated, you might have 4 or 5 teachers.
There's no almost performance management.
There's no performance management system. It's a job for life that you have. It takes longer to make change. So every day when you wake up, if you do something differently, you don't immediately see the results. So it is much harder. And then political change could happen. Bureaucratic change happens every 2-3 years. Even at the BEO, DEO level, the block district level, there's a lot of churn. Sometimes post is vacant.
Vacancies, huge amount.
So in that system, where the KPIs are sometimes not clear, where you have personnel management systems are not what they are in the corporate world, the hierarchies are not as well defined, the performance management is very, very different. It is a very different ballgame relative to the corporate world to drive change. And so I think the politicians and bureaucrats who make change happen are true heroes because, to do it, given all these constraints, is completely heroic. I mean, it's much more than what a corporate CEO does.
I completely agree with you. And in fact, I see often the challenge of governance is also a challenge of HR. Starting off, as you said, right, the vacancies, significant vacancies across any domain, any state you go to, there's massive vacancies. Then there is not enough kind of culture of training, mentoring, handholding, coaching, right, which is really the upskilling. That's kind of generally weak. And performance management, as we said, is more or less absent. Now, in this system to perform makes it that much more complex and that much more difficult.
Yeah. But I think a good realization for us is that we all tend to think of it sectorally, or even as secretary who's in education will tend to think of. But really there are some systemic things which, if each state government would take seriously, which is around, defining the outcomes more clearly, getting the personal management, whether it's when you recruit people to defining the job roles clearly, being clear about what tools they need to succeed, what training they need to have, how will their performance get measured, on a regular basis, how will they get regularized into their job, all of that. Again, using TCS as an example that has 600,000 people, the investment they make in people, in HR, in performance management is incredible. And so in government, how does one make that happen? And then more strategic budgeting as well, within the system. And then regular monitoring with good data. So some of our schemes are doing it, but I think systemically, if this gets embedded in state governments, it'll lead to much better outcomes over time. Already some elements are happening, but I hope that as the Indian state improves, much like corporate India has improved, that we will get much better at this in the next decade.